Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of City on a Hill. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with DeCourcy's side of things. Obviously hanging with his brother Louis and his dad, and obviously his dad's still not wanting any treatment, and it still doesn't make sense to DeCourcy. It's like, right, you watch mom die from a similar thing, but you fought tooth and nail. Didn't matter what it was. But in the end, his dad's perspective on things is, I was selfish and I was afraid. Obviously afraid of having to go in this world without the person that you love. Because obviously he could go to a hospital or something, but he's like, right, I've lived in this bed for 40 plus years. I want to die in, I'm not going to sleep anywhere else but my bed. I want to be comfortable. I just want to be left alone, and I'm okay. But I think that's that complicated thing about death. We've all experienced, I think so. If you haven't had, obviously anyone in your, immediate family die, I think that's a very fortunate thing. But, death is something people have to deal with on a regular basis, whether it's familial death, whether it's, family death, death sucks all around, and it's just I don't think there's no clear-cut answer or rule book of how to handle things, how to grieve, DeCourcy's way of wanting no, I want you to fight tooth and nail, I want you to try and fight, but his dad's perspective, I want to go out on my own terms. I don't want to get sick, and I don't want to do radiation and go through all that treatment just to be I want to be able to kind of still be me when I die. I want to go out on my own terms. And I probably, if anything, if I was in DeCourcy's situation, I'd probably be just like him. I'd probably be like, no, Dad, you don't know what you're talking about. Fight through this. You can fight. I know you still have fight in you. But, I can understand and respect where his dad's coming from, but there's still that part, as a son myself, I can just be no, I would want my dad to keep fighting in those circumstances too, Because I've had family members die, from sick. Because, at least 3 of my grandparents have died because they were, sick. That type of sick, not well. I won't get into it. I won't get too into it because I don't want to get too depressing with it. But it's just one of those things where I don't know. It's just that side of the episode really kind of breaks your heart. Especially had that moment later on when all 3 of them together watching the game together. And for him, I think that's all that mattered. It's having this time with his boys. It's right, going out on his own terms. I'm kind of laughing about he's wait, who are the Mets? And they're because really, you're gonna play it like that, Dad? It's this nice moment between them. I thought was beautiful, especially because their dad was there to mediate an argument they had. Because with everything going on, which we'll go to case and sides of things later, but obviously with the whole a cop killing another cop, just in general, it doesn't even just have to be a cop, just an innocent person in general. That obviously, him and his brother have very different perspective on things because he's trying to understand. He's asking his brother about the Blue Veil situation. It's if a cop, killed someone innocent, but his brother's asking for the context to it, which I think, to be fair, I'm with DeCourcy where it's no, all that should matter is it was an innocent person that was killed. That's all you need to matter. But the fact is, he's here you go, cops defending other cops. And it's because Louis knows about the situation. It's right, a cop, the cop that's going down for killing, Grace's son last season, because I'm almost blanking on his name. Anton, right. For killing Anton. That cop, and it's right, the same guy that shot your wife. And he was I haven't forgotten. The fact is, he's don't you dare for a second, because she got shot, lost that baby, I don't get it twisted for a second. But for him, it's the fact is, someone that was sick in the head, Anton, ended up going after my wife. I had to watch that same young man's dead body after he was executed. Because for DeCourcy, it's the reason why I fight so hard is because I want the laws that they made for themselves that apply to them, I want them to apply to us too, that we get the same equality when it comes to the laws, because for him it's also right, I'm watching a cop get away with it, the same damn cop that if it would never put himself in a position between me and harm. That's his perspective on things. But Louis is also coming at it from a cop himself, because for him it feels for him, it's DeCourcy seems every cop is a bad cop. It's would you kind of lump me in there? But he's no, I know your character. I know who you are. It's but he won't give, in Louis' perspective, it's you won't give other cops that same platitude. You're only doing that for me. You're giving me the benefit of the doubt because you're my brother, but you won't give anyone else that. You kind of see the worst in them. And his dad kind of says, like, right, you guys have had this argument for so many years. You know, I guess it's like, right, they've both been in their positions on things. It is interesting, like, the law and order of it all. Like, you know, a cop and one being, like, you know, a DA and everything. But his dad says that, Louis, you've got to look at you need to kind of broaden your horizons, your view of things, because you're kind of looking at things on a micro level rather than a macro level. You should look at the bigger picture, look at the world. Kind of like you're so focused on like what you see on your daily basis that you're not willing to open your eyes to things larger. And then he talks to DeCourcy that it's like, right, you took this job in the first place. It isn't just all for this justice and stuff like that. It's because you're running away from having to like face something. You rather deal with all this than rather face yourself. He's like, so what's so scary about you that you're afraid to learn about yourself? You know? And that was kind of like his 2 cents about it. And they were both kind of awestruck and just like quiet afterwards. So, but it was this interesting thing. Like, obviously, DeCourcy could have gone more in detail about it. And the fact is he didn't and just kind of let his brother go like, no, it doesn't matter. You know, not giving his brother the full context. Because it's like, what I said should have been enough to get you more on my side. But now you're all about the blue veil. Because he can't fathom, like, why some cops are willing to protect pieces of shit, you know? But, yeah. Once again, that line from his dad telling him, like, right, I just want to be on my own. And he's like, okay, Dad, I understand. And he left his dad alone. And later in the episode, their dad passes away. And just, like, the moment, like, all they had to hear was, like, you could hear the footsteps upstairs, and you hear the footsteps stop. And that's in that moment they realized it. And his brother, like, Louis just kept shuffling the cards, and in that moment, of course, he grabs his brother's hands, like, it's okay. You know, and it's like both of them feeling that. And luckily, DeCourcy has Siobhan, which we'll talk about Siobhan's side of things too, but she kind of feels bad about, right, I wasn't there, which I think is kind of an interesting thing. I think she probably didn't, she tried to call him in the middle of the night because she had a panic attack. She woke, well, I don't know if a panic attack, but she woke up in a panic. And she called him because she wanted to hear his voice, you know, to kind of like ease her a little bit, but he was sleeping, didn't hear his phone ringing. But she didn't bring that up, so I don't know if he called her back the next day or maybe he completely was unaware that she had called. Because I'm like, it's the 90s, so I'm like, does caller ID exist? I don't know. I actually don't, because I legitimately don't remember. I don't think caller ID existed back then, did it? Because you'd have to do like star 69 to find out who called you, right? God, that feels like another lifetime ago. I'm trying to remember. I'm like, was caller ID a thing in the 90s? I don't think it was, but maybe I'm mistaken. Because that's why you had a pager, right? I don't know. Ignore me. But she said, I would have been here sooner if I knew. He's like, hey, it's okay. And the whole thing with his dad gave him perspective on things. He's like, right, I know what it's like to live not kind of being open about the fact that you love someone. Because he talked about it with things with her. It's like, right, I've been so busy trying to, like, advance in my career and stuff like that, that it's like, right, like, when's the last time I actually told you I missed you? You know, he's like, right, I'm just so kind of caught up. It's that thing of, like, you get so caught up in life and all this other bullshit that you kind of lose sight of what matters. Because Louis had even said, like, right, you think it's, like, yours and Dad's stubbornness that kept you apart for years. Who's to say the stubbornness isn't yours? And I think he's applying that. Like, yeah, I have been pretty stubborn, very set in my ways about things. And I think it is going to cause a change in DeCourcy going forward, especially at things between him and Siobhan. Because it's moments like that where it's like, you need to hug the people you love tighter, because it's like, right, like, because he was telling her, right, you don't got to apologize, like, you know, you didn't make death a thing, it just is what it is. So I just thought that was kind of a really beautiful and touching moment that they had, just with everything going on, you know. Because both of their, like, her mom and his dad were both, as they say, like, cut from the same cloth, basically not very good at, like, telling how they really feel. And she says that he doesn't need to basically, like, handle and, like, everything on his own. It's okay to lean on me. Like, let me see you when you're not okay, because you kind of bearing your feelings to me doesn't make you any less of a man. Like, you know, because I think that's something we all can, like, yeah, like, the whole thing of, like, oh, like, I'm the type of person who can admit, like, I bottle my feelings up. I've always worked hard to try and, like, fix that aspect about myself. But it is that thing of, like, yeah, like, it's not the most masculine thing. Like, I think that's kind of almost a battle against, like, masculinity. Men in general, we feel like we have to, like, say, no, it's okay to be vulnerable sometimes, I have like it's not even. I mean, maybe on some subconscious level, there is that element of like being vulnerable with your feelings isn't very manly. I've never considered myself the most manly person anyway. So maybe on some subconscious level, that's what it is. I think there's other contributing factors to it, but still. So I just thought that was kind of a lot of interesting stuff. And jumping ahead a little bit, I even love Jackie in that moment with DeCourcy being like, "Hey, like I heard about your dad." And he's like, "How?" It's like, yeah, this is still my city. And he's like, yeah, your dad, I mean, cheers to him for raising a son like you. He's like, sons. And he was like, correction, sons. Because he's like, right, you and me, he's like, we both have two different reactions to our dads now. He's like, to me, it was just like, man, I just didn't want to end up dead like a lazy piece of shit like him. He's like, that's what my fear about my dad is. You are legitimately mourning your father's death because you loved him. My dad was it's kind of his perspective on things. So, and obviously I love Jackie. He was like, Jackie, you and I are not the same. Our fathers are not the same. And Jackie's like, honestly, we were not the same person. We were not at all alike when you first showed up back in the beginning of the series. But he's like, actually, the more and more every time we see each other, the more and more you're like me. I'm like, I think there is some truth to that because DeCourcy does rub off on Jackie, and so does Jackie. Jackie rubs off on him, so it is this interesting dynamic that they have, that despite the love-hate relationship that they have, there are moments when they do come together, when they're kind of cheering his dad is like, right, Dad, Pops, you were loved, and that moment, like, clinking together. I'm like, that's actually a really beautiful moment between these characters. Like, despite, like, they have venom for each other, but they also have love for each other in a weird, it's a very complicated love-hate relationship these two have, considering everything they've been through over these, even just the past 2 seasons alone. But let's kind of jump to some other angles. First and foremost, let's shift over to Kaysen really quickly. Obviously, he's watching IAD interrogate the cop who killed Wallace, and he's like, right, I just watched you just kind of basically let things go into a cop who killed another cop, and like, maybe, because he's like, right, you're not really, because the fact is you were willing to shake his hand afterwards. He came in partway through the interrogation. It's like you weren't even going hard after him. It's just kind of, it is what it is. It's like, this guy killed a fellow cop for ratting on another cop, and it's just like, for Kaysen, it's almost like I'm the only one who sees the shit for what it is. It's almost like everyone else is turning a blind eye to it. It's that blue veil, is that blue wall, is that fucked up system of it. And so, Kaysen got called out by Russ's wife, who was like, right, why is my husband dead and you're not, Because if I remember correctly, wasn't Kaysen the one that pushed Russ to turn on his partner about him killing Anton? Or did he just come to that on his own? I think Kaysen pushed him, didn't he? Or at least maybe Kaysen and DeCourcy pushed him. I don't remember. So maybe that's because the IAD person was like, not IAD. I think I might have said IED. IAD, Internal Affairs person, was just kind of like, oh, I know you're coming after me right now because like you feel like a piece of shit because this all happened under your watch. And yeah, it is true. There's truth to that. That it is something that, right, like, I mean, especially because Russ was right beside you too. So he ends up finding the guy later on and beats the living shit out of him at like a softball game or whatever, baseball game, was going to take a bat to him. And even his wife was like, Jesus, really? And he's like, yeah, I'm thinking I'm going to leave the Youth Strike Force. And he's like, oh, I thought you were going to, like, talk me out of it. She's like, honestly, if I had my way, you would leave the BPD in general. Because he's like, now I know how I would react if I had to go to your funeral. And he was like, babe, she's like, don't mag me. It's like, no. The fact of the matter is the job that you have is dangerous, and it's like you are putting your life on the line for people who are not nearly as honorable as you are. That's why she knows what's what. It's like, putting your line on on the line, your life on the line for people you can't trust. Just kind of the effed upness of all of it. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see, because Kaysen's at least one of the only cops that DeCourcy's cool with. I mean, obviously, I mean, well, Jackie's not even a cop anymore. So, yeah, Kaysen seems like the only cop he really interacts with because they're kind of on the same page and kind of have been. So, it's going to be interesting to see what Kaysen decides to do in that regard. He'll probably suffer some backlash from that, but maybe not. Maybe he'll get suspended. I don't know how that's going to shape out. All that's going to do is turn more probably dirty cops against, well, not even dirty, more cops against Kaysen. He'll look like a lunatic, so I can see that kind of leading to more and more fallout for him, but we'll have to wait and see. Circling around to the Siobhan situation, she's continuing to work on the the Big Dig case and trying to get justice for her client. But it's like, oh yeah, he wasn't wearing a hard hat or a soft hat or whatever, and he was drinking on the job. And Siobhan's like, there were literal cans of beer here. Like my client couldn't. Was it Hector? Couldn't have been the only one doing that. And the guy's just kind of like, right. Truth be told is, no hat or equipment was going to protect him from that. Also saying, like, if you were to ask anyone on this job and they were to talk to OSHA, they'd tell you that this place has its own problems, which that's as far as she got. And she confronted the guy who's the one kind of running the construction and stuff, like the guy who's the Big Dig, like it's his, he's the one paying for the operations and stuff. And she's trying to call him out because it's like, right, when, like you said, OSHA checked things out and gave you the clear, but it's like, right, was that back before there were, because she's like, were there actually any employee conversations or anything like that? Because it's most likely that the OSHA run through was checked before there were any employees on site. So of course they're going to give you the thumbs up instead of actually getting any complaints from any employees because none were working there at the time. But then he went up behind her and he touched her, and it obviously like freaked her out. She was like, don't touch me, get the fuck off me. She's juggling a lot, it's like, right, helping the Corsi with everything that he's going to be going through soon after having lost his dad, but still, obviously waking up in the middle of the night about this whole PTSD situation, trying to get justice for this family. Like, there's a lot of hats that Siobhan is juggling right now, and it's going to be interesting to see where things kind of go, continuing on that front. Because with such a big job like this, I know it's going to take its toll on her. But it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, what she ends up discovering, because she found out, what was it, that basically the company ended up shifting someone over to rebrand the company because they were already like getting in trouble for a whole bunch of OSHA related stuff, that now they ended up kind of rebranding, I think, the company as a different thing. So it kind of seems like a different entity. So with the rebrand, it's treated as a different entity. So all that legal, well, that whole like, oh, this is kind of an issue, this is an issue, kind of fades away. I think is kind of how Siobhan was kind of explaining it. So like I said, we'll have to wait and see on that front. There's the whole Jenny situation. She's helping out at the center, obviously being around the former father, Doyle. Helping out, what was that line he said I thought was really neat of, confusion is just, fear in disguise or something like that. It's kind of, I'm probably butchering it, but, and then, like, as Jenny was leaving, she saw him come out of the HIV testing, and you're like, oh! And so he's like, right, let me kind of explain things. He's like, yeah, before I took my vow of celibacy, I used to have sex with women all the time. And he kind of references him and a priest had sex. And I was like, I'm wondering, like, how long did the AIDS... Well, I mean, obviously, AIDS is still a thing. Like, it's not like it went away. But because obviously, like, the height of, like, the AIDS epidemic, I guess, it kind of like being a much bigger thing was like in the 80s, right? And I wonder what, like, does this still kind of fall into like the epidemic of the AIDS? Well, because this is just about like, right, if you're going to like people using needles, like don't share needles with people, like that being like trying not to, prevent the spread of like, well, this isn't specifically. I'm also going to tell you my science. I'm like the difference between like AIDS and HIV. Like I'm not well versed in understanding always the difference. Moving on from that. So like it turns out he sat with a priest, which I was like, oh, I'm wondering like, did he feel a certain way about that? Because you're also like, well, the way he was also phrasing, I was like, oh, and because of the whole HIV thing, I'm like, was it a guy? I was like, I can only assume because I don't know if there's many like female priests, if any, at all. And I'm like, huh. So probably like some helping people out with confusion must be making you, you know, because I'm like, huh. Because it's like, right, this is also the 90s too, so you're like, church is super against homosexuality, so I'm like, that's gotta, I don't know, man, that's gotta be interesting. Well, because also that facility is about people, like, helping out too, making people feel comfortable, so it's like, maybe it's kind of the perfect place for him to, because that's why he's taking his sabbatical right now, because of all of that. Like, you know, it's like, right, he broke his vow to God. So, and he opens up to Jenny about all this, and it's like, right, he never told anyone about it. And obviously, it's like, she's still trying to figure out things about her dad, which she's talking to Jackie about. He was like, we've been down this road 10 times before. And he's like, okay, what did I do? And she's like, nothing. She's like, I appreciate your consistency in that regard. Because she's still not sure what she wants to do about it. All of a sudden, Father Doyle, former Father Doyle, shows up, and lo and behold, who's there? Her father, which, do correct me in the comments down below, because I actually don't remember. Isn't Jenny's biggest issue with her dad, isn't just like, oh, he left me and my mom. That's all she told Father Doyle. But I'm like, didn't he molest her? If I remember correctly, that was the big beef, and I think she got super pissed at her mom, because either, like, she confronted her mom about not doing anything, or maybe, I forgot. Or maybe Jenny found out that her mom didn't do anything about it, knew about it, and just stayed with him after the fact. It wasn't until, like, he cheated on her that she finally kicked him. I don't remember. But do correct me. But I could have sworn it was, like, he molested her when she was younger. Because he was like, oh, this is my house, the house that I paid for. Like, why the fuck? Like, because, like, the lady that Jenny visited previously, oh, he wants nothing, he doesn't want to see you. And now he's like, oh, yeah, the father told me, like, oh, I made me see the light. He's like, yeah, like, got to put in some time before I hand in my payments at Heaven's Gate or something like that. And Jenny just, like, finally snapped and, like, pushed him, was hitting him. It's like, get out of my house, you fucking piece of shit. So it's like, yeah. She didn't tell Jackie about the fact is that her dad showed up. Because, wasn't that the whole thing, too? Like, Jackie, because I think Jenny never knew this. I think Jackie, I don't remember if she knew it or not. Because I remember having the conversation. Yeah, because I remember now. Jackie found out what her dad did and tracked him down and was like, don't ever come over here again, you piece of shit, or I will fucking kill you. If I remember correctly. So I'm thinking I am right about, like, yeah, he molested her. So, because Father Doyle doesn't know all the details. He only knows, like, oh, this is the man who, like, this is you can't communicate with a ghost, so get all of it out. But it's like, right, Father Doyle would have handled things differently if he knew the full story about everything between Jenny and her dad. So you've got that. Then you've got the whole situation with Jackie, who's looking for Victoria, who ran away with her boyfriend, Mustafa. And it's like, right, they, Letitia and, what's his face, her dad wants to, track down, Victoria. And so he's doing, investigations. He eventually confronts Mustafa, but it's like, yeah, I'm not a cop anymore, so I don't have to play by the law. But he's like, right, I don't know the ins and outs. Because initially, Jackie's thinking, like, right, Dominique overdosed, because she died. Because we saw her kind of overdosing near the end of last episode, and obviously Dominique confronted her dad about it at the end of the episode, hence the argument and everything. But Jackie couldn't find her, so he went to Mustafa's place, which that guy was like, oh, you look, what did the Arab, what did he do now? Who? He's like, oh, the Arab. It's like, well, he's Egyptian, but yeah. And I'm like, that's the fucked up thing about Jackie. He could be such a racist piece of shit sometimes, but he also has, like, this fountain of knowledge, because he referenced that whole thing with DeCourcy, where he's like, oh yeah, in India, they put on certain, like, colors to represent different things about a person. And of course and they're like, yeah, they parade the person around. He's like a Thanksgiving parade. And he's like, are you really saying all this after I just, like, buried my father in a casket? And he's like, sorry about that. Yeah, sorry. But it's like, that, his knowledge, but also, like, the fact is he corrected the guy. He's like, actually, he's Egyptian. But yeah, I'm like, you're such a racist piece of shit, but you can be racially and culturally sensitive sometimes. Because if I remember correctly, I think I rewatched this recently. When one of the first interactions, well, it was like the second time him and Karen Shimizu were talked it last season. I wouldn't even say it was in the first episode. She's like, "Oh, you're gonna call me Dragon Lady?" He was like, "Well, that's no." He's like, "Well, for one, that's kind of played out, but two, also that's Chinese." Because I was like, "Yeah, with the name Shimizu, I would be like, I would assume that's Japanese, but maybe I'm mistaken." Yeah, but it's like once again, it's like, yeah, you're getting shit correct. And I'm like, that's. You can be such a scummy, racist piece of shit, but you can also be racially sensitive. It baffles me you are a fucking walking paradox / contradiction, my friend. It's so weird. But, it's not until they got into, Victoria's room that Letitia was like, yeah, Victoria doesn't have any friends. All she has is Mustafa and, Dominique. And in that moment, he realized it's like, right. I've been trying to come at this from the perspective of, oh, she must be staying Mustafa, and that's what this is all about. Found her at Dominique's place, and he's like, I get it. Like, you know, it's like, he's coming at this situation because he's worried about the trouble she can get in. Because he knows what it's like to have a daughter run wild, kind of doing her own thing. And it's like, right, your dad might not be the best person ever, but obviously he cares about you, loves you. You guys, you know, get in, you know, fights like cats and dogs. I get it. But he's like, that's, you know, that's just kind of your thing. He's like, I mean, me and Benny didn't always get along. Granted, I mean, we never fought like you guys did. We just never talked. So that's why we never fought. We never talked in the first place. Obviously, the relationship's in a much better place. But everything with Benny, like overdosing and everything, like he would, you know, and he wants to make sure that was kind of something a point he was pushing with Mustafa. Like, he doesn't. Because when he sees Victoria and thinks about, like, a parent legitimately worried for his daughter, like, it makes him think of Benny, and he doesn't, you know, what happened to her in the grand scheme of things, and he doesn't want the same thing to happen to Victoria. But Victoria's like, no, my dad was here the night that she OD'd. And it's like, oh, how'd you, like, do you have any proof? It's like, yeah, this bottle. Dominique, there's no way she could have afforded it. Go back, Victoria's dad is like, oh, she just wants to blame me for everything. He's like, were you there? He's like, no. Are you interrogating me? He's like, no, but there were 2 glasses. He's like, that's simple stuff. And then immediately, what does he do? He's like, yeah, I want to show you something outside. Ooh, I paid you off. It's like, that doesn't look suspicious. But like, Jackie knows something's a little off. But his biggest concern was like, you know, coming from my perspective, he's like, do something about your daughter. Like, you know, the fact is, your daughter is hurting right now, and just like because he's like, right, I didn't see the signs of what was wrong with what was happening with Benny until it was too late, and everything turned into what it did. So that was he doesn't want the same thing to happen to Victoria. It was kind of this nice little ride him and Jenny went on, like they were like young teenagers in like the BMW and just like kind of enjoying themselves. I thought that was kind of neat. But yeah, I think it's not going to be too long before, because Jackie can already sense something's up. I'm surprised things didn't start between him and Letitia. Like, just because based on stuff I've seen in the trailer, I know something's going to happen between them. Her husband knows it too, but she even asked a question. Letitia was like, "Oh, were you wearing protection when you were having sex with Dominique?" And she's like, basically, it was kind of like the after that kind of matters the most, because I'm like, that can end up in a complicated territory. Granted, it was only like a couple. Well, for one, I was about to say, she felt that she had sex recently, but she couldn't remember it, obviously, because he had like drugged her and got her drunk too. But also, if he wasn't wearing a condom when they are examining her body, because it'll be about 3 weeks before like the autopsy comes back and stuff. But what she OD'd on and stuff, but. If there's semen inside of her, that was kind of like Letitia's point of like, yeah, someone might be able to trace that back to you. So, and the fact, once again, the fact is she's just so okay with that, because it's like, right, it wasn't even just like, you co-signed so much of what he does, and I just don't know why. I mean, God knows, once again, God knows how many victims there are, considering, she even said like, oh, we've been married for 12 years, and that's 12 years worth of, I mean, God knows when all of this ended up starting either, so. We got a whole season of just him getting away with all the terrible shit he's doing. Oh, and his plan is just to send Victoria to England. It's like, yeah, oh, we were there as a family kind of tracing around Europe, but it's like, oh, no, let her go there. It's like basically getting her away so that she'll, like, forget about this. It's like, she won't, though, because she believes you're responsible for killing her friend, but out of sight, out of mind type of situation. And it's like, well, she's also out of your sight. Something terrible could happen, because she could, like, drown her sorrows in all of this, by like overdosing or something, which Jackie's kind of the most concerned about. So we'll see, because Victoria will probably try and put up a fight about all of this, and Jackie will probably feel some form of responsibility considering he's the one that kind of dragged her back. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.